The words hit before the brakes did. Her white Lexus didn't just stop. It screamed to an absolute zero so close to my newly established boundary that I felt the shrapnel of flying gravel tear into my brand-new work jeans. The atmosphere immediately thickened, choked by the dual stench of scorched rubber and that high-end toxic perfume she always wore. It was abrasive, invasive, and aggressively unforgettable. Karen Ellsworth didn't exit her vehicle. She descended from it, moving like a prosecutor stepping out of a tribunal she already owned and corrupted. Her designer sunglasses, a shield of pure, unearned arrogance, caught the mid-morning sun, and in the reflected glare of the lenses, I saw a distorted mirror image of my own defiance. The heavy-duty sign declaring private property, no HOA jurisdiction. For a single silent second, I saw myself reflected in those lenses, calm, steady, and utterly untouchable, standing behind a line of demarcation that she would not be allowed to breach. Before we move forward, comment down from where you're watching right now. She slammed the SUV door with a single aggressive impact that didn't just close the vehicle. It declared war across the open field. There were exactly 3 feet of scorched earth between her hostility and my quiet sovereignty. That was the precise distance separating her absolute need for control from my own lethal, necessary defiance. "You think you can just ignore the rule?" She spat, her voice snapping like a frayed wire. "I've been president of Meadowbrook Estates for 15 years. You cannot just throw up an unapproved eyesore like that without my signature, without filing an ARB request. It violates the visual continuity of the entire community." I was brushing dust off my hands, making a deliberate, silent show of the fact that her theatrics were less relevant than the dirt on my knuckles. I kept my tone surgical, stripped of all emotion. "Good morning, Mrs. Ellsworth. You are trespassing on my side of the line," I stated. Her nostrils flared, a perfect physical manifestation of her seething contempt. "There is no your side. This entire lane falls under our covenant section 4.1. Do you think you're above the governing documents that hold this entire neighborhood together?" I let her storm blow itself out. "That is rule number 1 with predators like Karen Ellsworth. You allow the noise to peak. You allow them to expend all their toxic energy, and then, and only then, do you deliver the killing blow with cold, documented fact." When the silence finally settled like radioactive ash over the gravel, I responded. "According to the certified county survey, the one certified by the assessor's office 3 weeks ago, this property's boundary is 50 feet outside your HOA's jurisdiction. Your covenant section 4.1 terminates at the recorded Meadowbrook plat map boundary. You are standing in the middle of a fatal miscalculation." She took one menacing step closer, her toxic perfume cutting through the heat like a blade. Her face, that perfect mask of suburban authority, did not even twitch. "Then you can explain that to my attorney," she hissed. "I will be issuing fines, $200 per day per violation, until this industrial structure is removed and your unsanctioned defiance is broken. Expect the formal notice by email before sunset." She spun on her heel. The gravel snapped under her stilettos, sounding like punctuated, definitive statements of intent. She accelerated away in the hated Lexus, spitting a final defiant cloud of dust. I stood there, unshaken, letting the dust settle. I glanced up at the highest point of my brand-new gate. The infrared camera was blinking its red light. Steady, faithful, unblinking. It had recorded the entire interaction. Her vehicle's make and license, her exact location relative to my property pin, her exact threats, and her final frustrated departure. It was all logged. If you have ever had a neighbor who thought they had the inalienable right to own your existence, who believed your mailbox color was an act of personal aggression, then you need to buckle up immediately. That sign, private property, no HOA jurisdiction, wasn't decoration. It was a declaration of war, and I had just recorded the first act of aggression. The HOA tyrant had just triggered a conflict where her toxic arrogance would finally meet my cold, calculated documentation. But what Karen Ellsworth didn't know yet was that I hadn't spent 3 months hunting for a house with a view. I had spent 3 months hunting for a fortress of certified freedom. And when she tried to attack my gate, she didn't just confront a homeowner, she confronted a pattern analyst who understood the value of evidence, the weight of a county seal, and the deadly precision of overwhelming proof. And I was about to apply strategic muscle memory to her entire, corrupt little empire. She thought she was issuing a fine. I knew she had just signed a confession. When Karen Ellsworth's hated Lexus vanished in a final, defiant spray of dust, the silence that fell wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, pregnant with expectation. The dust took a long, deliberate time to settle, hanging in the air like a toxic chemical weapon. I stood there until every particle had surrendered to gravity. My hand was still resting on the no HOA jurisdiction signpost, the metal letters glinting in the hostile sun. They looked insignificant against all that open, wild land, but to me they represented the first honest, certified boundary I'd established in a decade. This ranch wasn't a casual purchase. It was a strategic acquisition. I had spent 3 months hunting for this particular fortress of certified freedom. I wasn't interested in the view, the soil, or the quaint barn. I was interested in one single, non-negotiable metric: the absolute, unadulterated absence of external control. My last neighborhood had been a masterclass in tyranny by committee. It was the kind of place where community was simply code for total, intrusive control. They didn't just enforce rules, they weaponized them. You couldn't park your own truck in your own driveway overnight without receiving a formal, threatening warning. My choice of mailbox color, beige instead of the HOA's approved, aggressively taupe palette, earned me a $70 criminal fine. Once, I received a violation notice because my trash bin lid didn't close all the way. It wasn't neglect, it was a windy day. But the violation stood. I remember sitting at my kitchen table one night, 3 violation slips spread out in front of me like court summons delivered by a petty dictator. That night, the truth landed with the crushing weight of a financial anchor. I was paying monthly dues to people who truly believed courtesy and common sense came with a crippling, toxic price tag. That moment was the pivot point. I started looking for a property that was not merely outside their reach, but beyond their very grasp. Every search was careful, relentless, calculated. I am an analyst by trade. My entire professional life is built on patterns, data verification, and the cold, hard process of eliminating variables. I applied that exact military-grade process to securing my peace of mind. I started at the federal level. County records, boundary lines, zoning codes. If I could have graphed safety, I would have done it. When I finally located this old ranch lot, it wasn't beautiful. The fence lines were overgrown, the gate was rusted, and the barn leaned over like it was tired of fighting gravity. But there was a quiet in the air that felt absolutely earned, not given. It felt like sovereignty. The same day, I called a property rights attorney. "No HOA?" I demanded. He actually laughed. "Not even a whisper of one," he confirmed. That was the only validation I needed. 2 weeks after the closing, the reconstruction began. I repainted the barn, but more importantly, I dug new post holes and installed my perimeter defense. I installed commercial-grade security cameras, not because I was paranoid, but because I'd learned a critical lesson from the last neighborhood. Peace is not a condition. It is a resource you must meticulously record and document in case someone tries to confiscate it later. My mother called often during those first few weeks. She has a way of turning small talk into sermons, unsolicited but often necessary mandates. "How's the new place?" she asked one morning while I was tightening the last bolt on the gate. "Quiet," I said. "Quiet can be dangerous if you don't know what to do with it," she warned. "I just want a place that's mine," I told her. "No rules, no committees, no one measuring my grass to prove I belong." She gave a soft, knowing chuckle. "Then make sure your piece has a backbone, Donovan. Boundaries aren't fences. They are definitions of respect. Keep yours clear and keep the receipts." That line became my standing operating procedure. Definitions of respect. Maybe that's why I immediately laminated the certified county survey map. Maybe that's why I bought heavy commercial-grade steel hinges instead of cheap residential ones. Every small decision felt like staking my claim, not just to acreage, but to the inalienable right to live without permission. By the end of the second week, everything worked exactly how a pattern analyst would demand. The gate swung smooth and silent. The intercom buzzed once when I tested it, and the camera light blinked red, recording. I remember feeling the potency of building something no one else could censor or edit. That morning, when Karen Ellsworth's SUV came roaring up the road, she didn't just break the quiet. She shattered the stillness. The flash of the HOA decal on her windshield, that mark of shame, was the first indication that the toxic arrogance I had fled was now attempting to follow me. Her perfume hit the air like a chemical weapon, followed by her voice, sharp as razor wire. And just like that, the quiet I had so strategically built cracked. As she drove away, promising fabricated fines and non-existent legal action, I stood there, watching the dust roll over my new fence line like a precursor to absolute war. I didn't shout. I didn't engage in the noise. I simply looked at the blinking camera light and realized something that transcended petty property disputes. That sign wasn't just decoration. It was a declaration of war, and I had just recorded the opening volley. What Karen Ellsworth didn't yet realize was that she hadn't just insulted a homeowner. She had attacked a system, a fortress of documented facts, and I was about to apply strategic muscle memory to every piece of criminal fabrication she dared to send my way. She saw an eyesore. I saw a pre-existing condition of her toxic reign that was about to be exposed. The sun hadn't even cleared the horizon on Monday morning, but the toxic arrogance I had escaped was already attempting to bridge the gap. My phone buzzed, the subject line a digital declaration of war. Violation notice. Immediate action required from Meadowbrook Estates HOA board. I didn't need to open the email to feel the familiar, sickening pressure, but my analyst's discipline demanded meticulous scrutiny. I stared at the screen. My property wasn't even in their jurisdiction. And yet, there it was. The official header, the cheap blue HOA logo, and the signature line of the tyrant-in-chief, President Karen Ellsworth. The entire email was written not as a request for compliance, but as a courtroom transcript wrapped in pure corrosive intimidation. It began, "Dear Mr. Pierce, following a routine community inspection, your property has been found in violation of several community standards, including but not limited to." And then followed the 7 fabricated claims. They attacked everything. Unauthorized signage visible from the main road, the non-compliant gate color, matte black, not HOA-approved palette, fence height, exceeding forfeit, and even landscaping below minimum standards. The final aggressive flourish, an immediate demand to correct all violations within 5 business days or face fines of $200 per day, per violation, backed by the threat of legal action. 7 fabricated claims. None of them factual, all of them designed to induce immediate, frantic submission. I didn't panic. Documentation wasn't paranoia, it was strategic muscle memory. I took a screenshot. Then another, capturing the header, the exact timestamp, and the sender address. I saved both to 3 separate locations: my laptop, the cloud, and an encrypted external drive. This was not a negotiation. This was the formal initiation of an attack, and I was logging the crime scene. I immediately forwarded the evidence to my attorney. Subject line: received this today. Property confirmed outside HOA jurisdiction per county records. Please advise. By the time the message confirmed delivery, my pulse had settled back into its cold execution rhythm. This wasn't about a single gate. This was about exposing Karen Ellsworth's entire HOA power structure. This woman was not maintaining standards. She was feeding an addiction to control, disguised as responsibility. The truth about her toxic reign, the history of her abuse of power, was something I needed to understand fully. The historical pattern was the real weapon. I drafted a reply to her. It was surgical, direct, and utterly devoid of emotion. Mrs. Ellsworth, thank you for your message. According to the Certified County Survey dated April 15th, my property lies outside the Meadowbrook Estates HOA boundary. I've attached the relevant documentation for your records. Best regards, Donovan Pierce. No anger, no sarcasm, just paper against noise. I checked the certified boundary map attachments 3 times, then hit send. The message vanished into the ether, sent off to wherever unreasonable authority goes when it runs out of ground. The silence that followed was heavy, the sound of a predator recalculating its strike. And the strike came not through official channels, but through the back door. Digital slander. Tuesday night, my phone buzzed with a message from an old co-worker who still lived inside that toxic subdivision. Hey man, I think you should see this. Attached were screenshots from the Meadowbrook Community Watch Facebook group, a breeding ground for toxic solidarity, 3.2K members strong. At the top of the feed was a new post by Karen Ellsworth. Her words were polished, weaponized, designed to turn neighbors into a furious mob. A new resident has purchased property adjacent to our community and is refusing to comply with our long-standing neighborhood standards. He has erected an industrial gate, posted aggressive signage, and rejected all reasonable communication. His behavior threatens the visual harmony and property values we've all worked so hard to maintain. The comments piled up like digital stones. Unbelievable. People like that ruin good neighborhoods. Sue him until he sells? Typical outsider. No respect. The mob was rallied, throwing accusations without a single fact check, driven entirely by the tyrant's narrative. I did not post a word. Arguing online is a strategic failure, like yelling into a Category 5 hurricane. All noise, zero progress. Instead, I opened my laptop and started the Meadowbrook HOA escalation log. Across the top row, I typed headers in bold: date, time, event, evidence, witnesses. Entry 1, April 21st, 9:47 a.m. Verbal confrontation at property line. 6 camera angles recorded. HOA president on site. Entry 2, April 25th, 6:32 a.m. Violation email received. Screenshot and attorney forwarded. 7 fabricated claims. Entry 3, April 25th, 8:17 p.m. Facebook post defaming property owner. 47 comments. 3,200 group members. Public slander evidence archive. For each row, I linked the screenshots, video clips, and emails. Everything was labeled, cross-referenced, and time-stamped. The way other people build fences, I built records. She was building a narrative with cheap lies. I was building a federal-grade case with documented facts. I looked out the window at the dark field separating my land from hers. A single porch light burned in the distance, her house glowing like a warning beacon in the night. I didn't feel rage. I felt a deadly, steady focus, because while she was rallying a panicked mob, I was cataloging her every criminal move. The HOA power structure was built on fear and rumor. My counterstructure was built on truth and certification. And in the end, only one would survive the audit. By noon on Thursday, the air was shimmering above the gravel, the heat distorting the horizon like a funhouse mirror. I was deep into a high-stakes client call, data verification on a major financial acquisition, when the intercom at the gate buzzed. It wasn't the gentle chime of a delivery driver. It was one long, insistent tone that sounded like a demand, a declaration of unwanted arrival. I muted my microphone, switched to the camera feed, and immediately saw 3 hostile figures standing at my barrier. Front and center was Karen Ellsworth, immaculate as always in her pastel blazer and judgmental pearls, flanked by 2 men. They wore clipboards, cheap polos, and that unmistakable, toxic HOA arrogance that comes from never having their authority questioned. I took a slow, deep breath, anchoring myself in the reality of the numbers I'd been analyzing moments before. "Excuse me a moment," I told the client, my voice perfectly level. "Something's come up that requires immediate documentation." Switching to the intercom app, I pressed the talk button. "Can I help you?" I asked. Karen Ellsworth leaned toward the camera, her expression already tight, her face set in a hard, ugly mask of entitlement. "Mr. Pierce, we are here to conduct a routine inspection of your property. Please open the gate immediately." I kept my voice cold, clinical, entirely lacking in inflection. "You don't have jurisdiction to inspect anything on my land, Mrs. Ellsworth. Your authority terminates at the recorded Meadowbrook boundary line." One of the men, late 50s with the HOA logo stitched clumsily on his shirt, cleared his throat, reading from his clipboard with practiced bureaucracy. Under Section 4.7, the Architectural Committee reserves the right to access any property that could impact community standards. "That section doesn't apply to me," I stated, allowing a thread of dangerous authority into my voice. "You are standing at my boundary, certified by county records, not yours." Karen Ellsworth stepped closer still, the camera capturing the frantic flush creeping up her neck. Control was her oxygen, and she was suffocating. "You're being uncooperative, Mr. Pierce. Refusal to comply can and will result in legal consequences. Open the gate." "Mrs. Ellsworth," I said, my voice dropping an octave to a low, commanding register. "This is private property. You may observe from the county road, but if you cross that line, you will be arrested for trespassing." And then she broke. Silence. Then metal rattled. She grabbed the gate with both hands, that perfect manicure ruined by sheer impotent rage, and violently shook it. The heavy steel frame clanged against its hinges like a jail door slamming shut, the sound sharp and brutal in the midday sun. "This is ridiculous!" she screamed. "You can't just lock yourself away and pretend you're above the community. We have rules. We have standards." The 2 men beside her exchanged panicked, uneasy glances. One whispered, "Karen, maybe we should—" She didn't even look at him. "Shut up, Mitchell!" she snapped, her eyes glued to the camera. I pressed the intercom button again, tone utterly unyielding. "You have 10 seconds to step back from my gate before I call the sheriff." Through the screen, I watched her hesitate, her grip tightening, calculating the risk. Inside the house, my mother called out, "Donovan, what's happening?" "Just an HOA field trip," I said quietly, already dialing the county sheriff's non-emergency line. When the sheriff's cruiser rolled up 15 minutes later, blue lights flashing against the dust, Karen Ellsworth was still there, pacing, muttering, surrounded now by a small, curious crowd of neighbors who had wandered over to witness the collapse of her authority. Deputy Hollis stepped out, young but unshakably steady. He listened as Karen Ellsworth launched into her toxic, self-serving speech. Her voice carried on the air, littered with terms like non-compliance, obstruction, and community integrity. After a few minutes, he approached my gate and pressed the button. "Mr. Pierce, Deputy Hollis, County Sheriff's Department. Mind if we talk?" I grabbed my folder, the laminated survey map, the property deed, the zoning certification letter, and walked out to the boundary line. The deputy was polite, professional, and methodical. "Sir, there's some disagreement about jurisdiction here. Can you show me what you've got?" I handed him the folder. "Everything's in here. Certified county records. This property is 50 feet outside Meadowbrook jurisdiction." He flipped through the pages slowly, meticulously reading the legal descriptions. Karen Ellsworth tried to interject twice, but the deputy simply raised a hand each time without looking back. A devastating, silent dismissal of her power. Finally, he closed the folder, handed it back, and turned to her. "Ma'am, according to these records, this property is outside your HOA's authority. You don't have legal grounds to enter or inspect." Her face went crimson with disbelief. "That's not what my records show. The county made a mistake." The deputy didn't flinch. "County records are county law, ma'am. If you believe there's an error, take it up with the assessor's office. But right now, you are on this gentleman's property boundary after he's asked you to leave. That's trespassing." Karen Ellsworth was momentarily stunned into silence. "I want your supervisor," she demanded. "I know Sheriff Briggs personally." "You're welcome to file a complaint," Hollis replied calmly. "But right now I need everyone to step back and return to the public road." Mitchell and the other inspector immediately retreated. The small crowd began to scatter. Only Karen Ellsworth stayed rooted to the spot, glaring at me through the bars. "You think this is over?" she spat. "No," I said softly, looking up at the camera. "I think it's documented." That did it. She spun around, heels grinding the gravel, and stalked back to her hated Lexus without another word. The engine roared, tires spitting dust as she sped off. The deputy watched her go, then turned back to me. "You handled that well, Mr. Pierce. Stay calm. Keep everything on record." He adjusted his hat, giving a faint smile. "Keep recording, sir. Paper beats politics every time." As his cruiser rolled away, I looked up at the gate camera. The red light blinked once, steady, faithful, unblinking. The field was quiet again, but it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of certified victory, and this one had witnesses and a badge. The next morning the air felt different, cleaner, lighter, the feeling that follows a necessary tactical engagement. I knew this was the moment to move from reacting to reporting. By 9 a.m., I was uploading the camera footage from yesterday to a secure drive. Each clip was meticulously labeled, "Gate Incident, April 27th, complete with exact timestamps, file hashes, and transcript notes of her verbal threats. 6 camera angles recorded the verbal felony." Then, I wrote a short, clinical summary to accompany the evidence to the county zoning office. On April 27th, HOA members attempted to conduct an unauthorized inspection of my property, claiming jurisdiction. Attached are certified county documents proving my land lies outside Meadowbrook HOA boundaries. Please confirm, official, status and advise on next steps. Respectfully, Donovan Pierce. I attached the videos and the scanned legal documents and sent it with delivery confirmation. I waited most of the day in a tense quiet. Bureaucracy moves slow, and I had learned that patience is a weapon when you wield it right. At 3:14 p.m., my phone rang. Caller ID, County Zoning Office. "This is Donovan," I answered, already hitting the record button on my phone. "Mr. Pierce, this is Officer Keating from Zoning," a woman's voice said, clear, firm, professional. "I received your report and reviewed your attachments. Thank you for being thorough. It helps us a lot." "I try to make documentation a habit," I replied. She gave a small, dry chuckle. "That's obvious. I wanted to let you know something that might explain what's been happening. I leaned forward, my knuckles white on the desk. Go on. Mrs. Ellsworth, the HOA president, submitted a proposal last year to expand Meadowbrook's boundaries to include your parcel and 2 others. She claimed she had property owner consent, but when we investigated, we found no signed approvals. The county denied her request and formally closed the case last October. The line of my jaw tightened. I stared out the window at the fence line. So she knew. She knew this land wasn't part of her HOA, I stated, the realization landing with the crushing weight of a financial anchor. Yes, Kading said quietly. She was informed in writing. I can send you the documentation if you'd like. Something certified with the county seal. I'd appreciate that. Immediately. You'll have it by the end of the week. Thank you, officer. And for what it's worth, she added before hanging up. I appreciate your clarity, Mr. Pierce. You did everything right. Keep doing it right. That's how you win these things. When the call ended, I sat there, letting the magnitude of the discovery sink in. All the noise, the threats, the fabricated fines, it had all been built on something she knew was a criminal fabrication. It wasn't ignorance, it was pure, toxic arrogance. By Friday afternoon, a knock at the door broke the quiet. The mail carrier held out a manila envelope marked Certified Mail County Zoning Department. I signed for it and opened it right there on the porch. Inside was a 2-page letter with an embossed county seal and the final devastating formal statement. After review of recorded plats and jurisdictional maps, parcel E147, owned by Donovan Pierce, lies wholly outside Meadowbrook Estates HOA. Any attempt to enforce HOA covenants or collect fees related to this parcel constitutes unauthorized action under county ordinance. I read it twice, then once more slowly, the way you read something you know you'll use in a deposition. I scanned it, made 6 digital copies, and slid the original into a waterproof sleeve inside my evidence binder. Standing on the porch, I could see the Meadowbrook entrance in the distance. The white fences, the manicured lawns, symmetry so tight it looked rehearsed and terrified. For the first time, none of it intimidated me. All her power, all her titles, had evaporated under the weight of one stamped signature. I closed the folder, feeling the edge of absolute confidence. Truth isn't loud, it's certified. Monday morning brought the arrival of the formal counterstrike, delivered not by courier, but by the legal apparatus she commanded. A FedEx truck rolled up my drive, and the driver handed me a thick envelope stamped with the embossed lettering of Clayton and Grayson, attorneys at law. I didn't need to open it to know its content. The paper itself smelled of that sterile, toxic scent of intimidation that lawyers bottle better than perfume. I signed for it, waited until the dust from the tires settled, every action deliberate, before slicing the seal with a utility knife. 3 pages of heavy paper slid out, complete with a gold seal and the title in bold, aggressive lettering. Cease and desist. Immediate compliance required. I read the first line aloud, just to hear how ridiculous the manufactured aggression sounded in the open, quiet air. To Mr. Donovan Pierce, you are hereby instructed to remove all non-compliant structures, signage, and fencing located within the Meadowbrook Estates' jurisdiction. Your refusal to comply has caused measurable aesthetic and financial harm to the community. The threat intensified. Should you fail to act within 10 business days, the HOA reserves the right to pursue damages in the amount of $50,000, $50,000 for property value depreciation, and emotional distress caused to residents. I actually smiled when I read the last part. Emotional distress. That was a new level of desperate fabrication, even for Karen Ellsworth. I sat down at the porch table, grabbed a red pen, and began marking up the letter. This was now less a legal threat and more a fraudulent report requiring aggressive annotation. The first flaw was circled immediately. Within the Meadowbrook Estate's jurisdiction. My note beside it read, "Property confirmed outside jurisdiction per county zoning letter dated April 29th. Blatant overreach." The second flaw, measurable financial harm. I circled the entire phrase and wrote, "No evidence, no appraisal, no valuation. Unsupported claim." The third flaw, legal authority. I underlined the whole paragraph twice. Ceased at boundary line. Overreach established by county denial of expansion, October last year. By the time I was finished, the letter looked like a teacher's worst nightmare. 3 pages of red ink exposing legal overreach, all neatly dismantled. I scanned each page, saved the images, and attached them to a new email from my attorney. Subject line, "Received cease and desist." Analysis, complete. His reply came 5 minutes later. "Donovan, this is impressive garbage. Nothing in here holds up. They're bluffing. Want me to reply?" I typed back, "I'll handle this one myself. Better if it comes from me." Then I started drafting my response. It had to be simple, direct, respectful, but absolutely surgical. "Dear Mr. Grayson, I acknowledge receipt of your correspondence dated May. Please be advised that my property parcel E147 lies wholly outside Meadowbrook Estate's jurisdiction, as confirmed by the county zoning administrator on April 29th. Letter attached. Your claims of violation and damages are therefore without legal basis. Any further attempts to enforce HOA regulations upon non-HOA property will be documented and treated as harassment under county ordinance. Respectfully, Donovan Pierce." I attached the county letter, the certified boundary map, and my deed. I printed 2 copies, one for my records, one for mailing. I drove into town, sent it certified mail with return receipt requested, ensuring I had certified, documented proof of their receipt, and dropped another copy off at the sheriff's department for record. No emotion, just cold, unyielding procedure. By the time I got home, the fear that had shadowed me for weeks had thinned out completely, like morning fog burned away by strategic sunlight. I realized I wasn't reacting anymore. I was leading the engagement. People like Karen Ellsworth and her hired lawyers thrive on manufactured noise and mistake intimidation for authority because it works on everyone else. But intimidation only works if you let silence follow it. That night, I filed the marked-up cease and desist letter into my binder, and right behind it, I slid the certified return receipt proof that I had answered on record. Outside, the gate light blinked, steady and patient. Inside, the last trace of fear finally went quiet. Fear lives in silence. I was done being quiet. The next phase of escalation came not from an email, but from an unexpected ally. It was a Wednesday evening, and the call came from a local number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some strategic instinct told me to answer. "Mr. Pierce." "Yes." "My name's Russell Abbott. I live in Meadowbrook. I think we need to talk about Karen Ellsworth." His voice carried the kind of absolute fatigue you only get from years of sacrificing peace for sheer survival. He suggested a small coffee shop halfway between my ranch and the subdivision. Neutral ground. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a thick, meticulously organized binder in front of him. He wasn't nervous. He was the quietly broken kind of man. He slid the binder across the table without preamble. "I kept everything," he said. The first page was a violation notice from 3 years ago. "Tree exceeds height regulation. $200 per day fine until removal." "An oak," he said. "My grandfather planted it in '78. Karen Ellsworth said it violated HOA sightline standards." "I checked," he continued. "There's no height restriction for pre-90 trees. Didn't matter. I paid over $3,000 in fines before I finally cut it down." His voice cracked slightly. You know what she said when I sent the removal proof? Thank you for maintaining visual consistency. I kept flipping through the next dozen pages. Printed emails, inspection reports, notices stamped, final warning. Another family fined for a garden hose visible from the street. A retired teacher cited for improper mailbox design. A single mother threatened with foreclosure for parking her car on her own curb during a storm. Every page followed the same toxic pattern: intimidation, escalation, submission. Most people just paid, Russell said quietly. Cheaper than fighting. Some moved away. She always buried them in paperwork. She's good at it. She knows the system better than anyone. I turned another page and saw something that stopped me cold. A complaint dated the exact same month Karen Ellsworth had filed her failed, fraudulent boundary expansion request with the county. You've had this all along? I asked. Every document, he affirmed. She's been doing this for 15 years. She wins because she never meets anyone who fights back with documented facts. He added, She's targeting you now because you represent what she can't control. You live outside the map she built for herself. That terrifies her. He leaned back, eyes fixed on his coffee cup. You know what's worse? Her husband is a lawyer. I asked him once, off the record, if the fines were even legal. He told me, no, but she doesn't listen to anyone, not even me. That detail landed like a physical blow. She wasn't enforcing order. She was feeding a personal pathology, control disguised as responsibility. I flipped to the final section. Photos. One showed a cracked mailbox with spray paint across it. Rules matter. Another, a garden gnome smashed in two. She got worse after that, Russell said. Started posting people's names in the HOA newsletter. Called it accountability reports. I closed the binder slowly. Why tell me now? Because the county called, he said. Someone filed an official complaint about harassment. They're reopening her old cases. They wanted my documentation, and I gave it to them. But I thought you should have copies too, just in case. He slid a flash drive across the table. Everything's on here. Dates, letters, witnesses. You're not her first target, Donovan. You're just the first one she picked who knows how to fight on paper. For a long moment, the hum of the espresso machine filled the silence. Do you think she'll back off now that the county's involved? Russell shook his head slowly. People like her don't retreat. They double down. She spent years building a world where she's right, and everyone else is wrong. If that illusion breaks, she breaks with it. He picked up his coat. When she loses control, he said quietly, she looks for someone to punish. He left, leaving the flash drive glinting under the cafe lights, feeling heavier than it should have. It carried not just plastic and data, but the crushing weight of every person who'd folded under her toxic rules. When I got home, I copied the files into my evidence folder, labeling a new section. Historical pattern. HOA abuse. Each document slid into place like another brick in a wall of certified truth she couldn't climb over. The storm hadn't hit yet, but now, for the first time, I wasn't standing alone, and when it came, I would be absolutely ready to deliver the final crushing blow. The email arrived just before sunset. Subject: Emergency HOA Meeting tonight. Agenda: pending legal action. At the bottom, a single toxic invitation. You're invited to attend. It was from Mitchell, the same board member who had looked distinctly uneasy when Karen Ellsworth was violently shaking my gate. His accompanying private message was short, terse. Several of us want to hear your side before any decisions are made. 7:00 p.m. at the community center. Please come. My attorney called within minutes, his voice tight with warning. Donovan, don't go. You have no obligation to attend. It's a trap. I know, I said, glancing out at the gate camera blinking in the dusk. But maybe it's time they all see the certified truth for themselves. Traps only work if the victim doesn't realize he's holding the keys. He paused, then sighed. Record everything. Already planning to, I confirmed, securing the body cam to my chest. By the time I arrived, the parking lot was aggressively full. Every car was lined up in that perfect, terrified HOA precision. Identical sedans, identical forced smiles, masking a surge of curiosity. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, washing the beige walls in a sterile, clinical glow. Folding chairs were filled with 40 or 50 people, whispering in low, anxious tones. At the front stood Karen Ellsworth, neat as always, her notes stacked beside her laptop, and a projector waiting to broadcast her carefully crafted lies. The moment I stepped through the door, the whispers swelled into a roar. She froze mid-sentence, her eyes narrowing into slits. "You're not a member of this association," she said sharply, her voice trembling slightly. "You don't belong here." Mitchell, the reluctant board member, stood. If this meeting's about him, he has a right to hear it. Karen Ellsworth's jaw tightened with palpable frustration. "Fine," she conceded, "but he doesn't speak until I'm finished." "Wouldn't dream of it," I said, my voice steady, walking to the back row and sitting down. My body cam light blinked. Recording. Her presentation began with an aggressive flourish of slides, using her phone's zoomed, grainy photographs of my gate, my sign, my barn. "This is what's threatening our community's image," she declared with venom. "Non-compliant structures, aggressive signage, hostile behavior." Each word was crisp, confident, rehearsed until it was toxic muscle memory. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others looking deeply unsure. Then she clicked the next slide. A cropped, selective image of our first confrontation. The caption read, "Aggressive response from adjacent property owner. Mr. Pierce has repeatedly refused communication." She continued, "He's disrupted our sense of unity, lowered property values, and created a hostile environment." That was the breaking point. I stood up slowly. "Mrs. Ellsworth," I said, my voice controlled but carrying the full weight of my documentation. "May I present my certified documentation for the record?" She snapped, "This is my floor." Mitchell looked at the others on the board. "I think we should hear him." Reluctantly, she stepped back. "Fine, 5 minutes." I walked to the front, connected my laptop, and let the first video play. The room fell into an absolute stunned silence as the footage rolled. There was Karen Ellsworth, shaking the gate, screaming about standards, her hands gripping the steel bars until her knuckles turned bone white. The audio picked up every word, every threat, every verbal felony. When that clip ended, I clicked immediately to the next. Her hated Lexus pulling up to my mailbox at night, her figure stepping out, the bat in her hand, the sound of 3 clean, devastating strikes echoing through the stillness. Gasps ripped through the room. Then the third clip. Karen Ellsworth shouting at Deputy Hollis, claiming jurisdiction, followed by the deputy's calm, irrefutable voice explaining she had none. "County records are county law, ma'am." When the screen finally went dark, no one moved. I turned to the board. "Everything you've just seen is time-stamped, verified, and backed up by county records. I didn't come here to destroy anyone. I came here to end this pattern of toxic tyranny for me and for everyone she's done this to." From the crowd, a man stood. It was Russell Abbott. His voice was quiet, but it carried the undeniable weight of years of oppression. "She fined me $3,000 for a tree planted before the HOA even existed," he said. "Said it was too tall. She made me cut it down." Another woman rose. She sent letters about my daughter's car being parked in the driveway overnight. I was recovering from surgery. She didn't care. A third voice joined in. She posted my name in the newsletter for not repainting my mailbox. I was in chemotherapy. Each testimony was another iron nail in the coffin she'd built for herself. Karen Ellsworth tried to interrupt, but her voice was a thin, panicked squeak. Those are isolated incidents. No, they're consistent, Mitchell said, standing taller than he ever had before. We've all seen it. The pattern is documented. The vice president of the board stood. I move for a vote of no confidence in President Ellsworth. Seconded, another member immediately confirmed. One by one, 8 hands rose. None opposed. Karen Ellsworth looked around the room, searching for loyalty, finding only a shamed silence. The same community she had ruled for 15 years was staring back at her, quiet, exposed, and finally free. Her husband, seated near the door, stood but didn't speak. He only lowered his head in absolute defeat. Karen Ellsworth's lips quivered as she gathered her notes. "You're making a mistake," she whispered, her voice breaking completely. "I built this neighborhood." "No," Mitchell replied gently, delivering the final, crushing judgment. "You built a prison. We're tearing down the walls." She walked out without another word, her heels clicking across the tile, the sound fading into an absolute, potent silence. When the door closed, no one clapped. No one cheered. They just sat there, absorbing the stillness that follows a truth finally spoken aloud and certified. I unplugged my laptop, packed my folder of incontrovertible facts, and turned to leave. As I reached the door, Mitchell's voice followed me. "Mr. Pierce," he said, "thank you." I nodded once. I just documented what happened. Outside, the air was cool, the night quiet. Streetlights flickered against the neat rows of identical lawns. Somewhere behind me, someone exhaled the kind of breath you don't realize you've been holding for years. For the first time, Meadowbrook felt honest. Justice doesn't need applause. It only needs clarity and documentation. The world didn't end with the vote of no confidence. It simply settled into an intense, profound quiet. 3 days after the emergency meeting, my phone buzzed with an email from the county office. Subject: Final findings. Meadowbrook Estates HOA criminal investigation. The report itself was 12 pages long, detailed, methodical, and absolutely devastating. It confirmed, beyond any doubt, the full scope of the HOA tyrant's destructive reign. The county found that over a 3-year period, former HOA President Karen Ellsworth had issued $47,000 in unauthorized fines, conducted unapproved inspections, and illegally misused HOA funds for personal legal action. The county's mandate was clear: full restitution, leadership restructuring, and the implementation of mandatory transparent governance measures. I read it twice, slower the second time, each sentence feeling like the iron closing of a chapter that had dragged on far too long. That afternoon, another email followed, this one from the new interim president, Mitchell. His tone was professional and humbled. "Mr. Pierce, on behalf of the Meadowbrook HOA Board, I want to formally apologize for the toxic environment you were subjected to. We are refunding fines to all affected residents and adopting new policies: full board approval for all fines, mandatory transparency reports, and written permission for all property inspections. Thank you for holding us accountable." For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. The same toxic organization that once tried to crush me now used words like apology and reform. I typed a short reply. "Thank you for doing the right thing." That's all I ever demanded. 2 days later, a car pulled up at my gate. It was an old sedan, not the hated Lexus. The man who stepped out looked smaller than before, his shoulders sagging beneath the weight of his own name. "Mr. Pierce," said Clayton Ellsworth, Karen Ellsworth's husband. I simply nodded. "Mr. Ellsworth?" He held out a thick envelope. Inside was a personal check. "For the mailbox," he said quietly, "and for everything else." "I don't need it," I replied. "I know," he said, his voice raw. "But I do. It's my way of saying I should have stopped her sooner. I should have challenged her authority before it became this destructive." I thought for a moment, then looked him directly in the eye. "I'll donate it. There's a domestic violence shelter in town. They help people who feel trapped by control they didn't ask for." He nodded slowly, a faint, sad smile tugging at the edge of his face. "That sounds right." Before leaving, he added, "Karen is in treatment now. Therapy, medication, counseling. She's not the same woman you met. For what it's worth, I think she finally sees it." "Good," I said. "Maybe peace starts there." By the weekend, the neighborhood that once treated me like an enemy started to change its toxic shape. The first knock came on Saturday morning. A small delegation of neighbors stood at the gate holding plates of baked goods and potted flowers. One of them, the same woman who once called me the outsider online, stepped forward, her eyes apologetic. "We came to say thank you," she said. "And sorry." I hesitated, then opened the gate. They walked in quietly, curious but genuinely kind. They admired the barn, petted the horses, and stayed for an hour, talking about everything except the war that had brought us here. Before leaving, one of them said, "You did what we should have done years ago." "I just wanted to be left alone," I replied. "Sometimes," she said softly, "that's the bravest thing anyone can want." That night, the air felt different again. Not heavy, not tense, just unfettered and still. I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the crickets instead of my own frantic heartbeat. The cameras still blinked quietly along the fence line, but now they didn't feel like guards. They felt like reminders of boundaries, of patience, of the certified peace that follows undeniable proof. A new HOA newsletter arrived in my inbox just after midnight. Its tone was nothing like the old poisonous propaganda. "We are rebuilding trust. Transparency is our new standard. Every resident deserves respect, not fear." No name was attached, just a community trying to remember how to be one. I leaned back and stared at the dark horizon where my land ended and theirs began. The boundary line hadn't moved an inch, but the distance between us had changed completely. For months, silence had meant danger, the calm before the next threat. But tonight, it meant something else. It meant choice. It meant peace. It meant the fight was finally over. The silence didn't feel defensive. It was absolutely earned. 3 months later, the county road outside my ranch looked the same as it always had, long, quiet, sun-warmed. But the world beyond the fence had been structurally altered. That morning, a new HOA newsletter arrived. Meadowbrook Estates, a new chapter in transparency. It listed open budget meetings, audit reports, and a brand new appeals committee, reforms they once swore were impossible. The last page caught my attention. 3 months ago, a boundary dispute forced us to confront how power can be misused and how accountability can rebuild trust. Today, Meadowbrook stands for fairness, not fear. No names, no blame, just truth finally written down and ratified. I closed the laptop and stepped outside. The gate motor hummed softly, not as a barrier anymore, but as quiet assurance that I could open and close my life on my own terms. That's when I saw the beige sedan slowing on the road, pulling up to the shoulder. For a moment, instinct tightened in my chest, but when the door opened, it wasn't fear that followed. It was a sense of final, clinical closure. Karen Ellsworth stepped out. She looked older, softer, as if the past few months had peeled away all the toxic armor. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached the gate. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said. "I just needed to say something." I didn't answer. I just let her talk. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "for everything. The harassment, the fines, the way I treated you. For thinking authority gave me the right to control what wasn't mine." Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. "My therapist calls it boundary anxiety. I used rules to keep my world predictable, but all I did was make everyone else's smaller." For the first time, I believed her. I stepped closer to the gate, keeping the steel bars between us, not out of fear, but potent symbolism. "Mrs. Ellsworth," I said quietly, "boundaries aren't walls. They're definitions of respect. That's all I ever wanted." She nodded slowly, eyes wet. "I know. Too late to fix it, but I know." She turned to leave, then hesitated. "I'm glad you stood your ground. You made me see what I'd become." When her car disappeared down the road, the air felt lighter. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It just meant the story could finally be closed. The new HOA president stopped by the gate later that day, dropping off a small envelope. Inside was a printed invitation: Community Appreciation Picnic, hosted by the reformed Meadowbrook HOA. I went for absolute closure. I sat on my porch again that evening. The gate camera blinked steadily under the orange sky. Not a warning light anymore, but a firm, steady heartbeat. Peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the moment you no longer need to defend it. I opened my laptop one last time and wrote the final entry in my case log: Matter resolved, boundaries defined, truth recorded. Then I added the only line that mattered: Peace achieved. And if you've ever stood your ground against unfair, arbitrary power, tell your story below. Because truth, once recorded and certified, never disappears. And neither does the unbreakable strength it leaves behind.